everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Today, your spirits-enabled guides are David Welsh and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 201, Becoming Terran with Mark Roth-Whitworth. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi there. Nice to be here.
Well, it's nice to have you back. Our listeners met you in episode 186 when we were talking about your book, 11,000 Years. And I liked 11,000 Years. You just sent the new one, which is a prequel.
11,000 Years starts in 2169 and then jumps approximately 11,000 years.
Take us back in time to Becoming Terran, which, again, it is a magnificent title. Because you have a Terran Federation and the things that we discover within the book 11,000 Years, how did that all come to place? How did we get the planet to agree on anything? And I like that your book goes there and explains how we get there.
Please note, it's the Terran Confederation.
Terran Confederation.
Names are really, really important to me. I'll tell you, when I was working on 11,000 Years, there were times where for hours or literally days, I was hung up on what to name something or someone. As I understand it, the EU isn't a confederation, but was moving towards that. I can't see all 212 or whatever it is, countries of this world coming together in a federation. I can see them making a confederation. They don't give up some of their own power, but the interface between all of them, which of course lets you tax multinationals.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about how America started as a confederation of states with like-minded, and then seems to be moving in that general direction. But there's a lot of argument about, are they going to become a federation, or that should further integration be a cautious things? And that's not even considering what Brexiters are dealing with.
I think a lot of EU members looked at Brexit and went, maybe staying in the EU is a good idea.
If only they'd done that research before they voted.
As I understand it, a lot of people didn't expect it to pass, and they did it as a lark or as a protest vote. It was supposed to be advisory. As soon as they got it, the Tories who were in charge, who'd been lying through their teeth and pushing it, suddenly went, okay, we have to do this right now.
Another thing that really just kind of, as I was reading your book, I ran into an article by, I don't know if you've read anything about Balaji Srinivasan, which is saying they're calling it the Silicon Valley plutocrats, aka, I don't know where anybody thinks that the Silicon Valley, air quotes, elite or plutocrats are in any way liberal, because oh, dear God, they're not.
You mean the article today? Or was it yesterday?
It was 3 days ago, I think.
I made a flyer for Becoming Terran, and I said, torn from headlines of today's and tomorrow's papers. I wasn't joking or exaggerating.
I was wondering, Charlie Strauss is the harbinger of doom in England. And now I'm trying to say, you may be a little of my harbinger of doom here, Mark. I got to warn you.
No, because the book is not about some big heroes. How we get from, I really like cyberpunk, but I don't know about you, but I did not sign up to live in a cyberpunk dystopia.
No.
That we're living in right now in the real world. I saw somebody saying, you always see about these other things, but you never know how we get there. Star Trek has its federation and other people have other things, but never how we get there. Well, this is how we get there. And the book is not about some famous hero. This is how ordinary people like you and me find themselves at the right place at the right time, and then find the courage to do what's right and what's necessary, even if it threatens their job, even if it threatens their life.
The power of one is very important, and I do like that it becomes very much a recurring motif through the book. What can one person do if one person says no in the right time, place, and way?
Exactly. And you see a bunch of minor characters that do just that.
It's interesting because when you look at the power of yes, I ignore mostly what's going on with Tesla and some of the others to look at SpaceX, and there is one human that controls controls far too much of our global communications today. How many are owned by this? And people are just starting to become aware of consolidation and monopolization, both globally and around, and saying, what is that good and what is that bad? So your book, Becoming Terran, is a very powerful way to say, what can I do as a whistleblower? What can I do to say, this is not right? What can I do?
Let me make one point that for the listeners. Like I said, names mean a lot. The title is Becoming Terran, as opposed to American or Nigerian or Chinese or South African. This is what Becoming Terran. This is how we become that one world. All humans. Just like in 11,000 years, it's not white male Americans go out and conquer the universe. This is all of us together.
It was also interesting to me when I say, if I ignored that I'd ever read 11,000 years and I was just concentrating on Becoming Terran, how do we get to Star Trek? How do we get to a united federation of planets? How did we get to, we are Earth, we represent Earth, and Earth has one opinion and one vote? I don't even see how we're going to get there. And you have an interesting way of plotting a possible set of events in that direction.
The same way that I did in 11,000 years. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's reasonable, what's possible that can happen. I try to do as little hand waving as possible. I don't know if you know Paul Such, Dr. SETI. He's an old friend of mine, and he came over to me at Boscone and said he'd finished 11,000 years and he hadn't found any scientific errors in it, which meant an immense amount to me. Here I am pushing beyond what we can imagine and not trying to break what we know, and I succeeded.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the politics here. I'm trying to push what we know as far as it'll go without breaking something.
You conveniently danced around FTL to a certain extent. You didn't quite explain it, which I liked.
I have a short story, if somebody will buy it, that explains the creation of the FTL of the drive.
Excellent. Well, if there's any agents out there listening,
it's a short story.
To a certain extent, it's much like Star Trek didn't go in and really explain anything. Like, you didn't really get beryllium and spare until somebody needed to draw it in there. And so it's one of the things that I like about science fiction, that as long as you have the basic math correct, from way when it was Heinlein wrote The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and they threw rocks at the Earth. And that made me go to my physics professor when I read it. I'm like, would this work? And he just nodded. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to a lunar base, to several lunar bases, and them building basically an accelerator on the surface. That you don't need a rocket to get something into orbit on the moon.
Have you seen the centrifugal systems that they're building?
No.
There's a company that's developing a system for launching stuff into orbit using essentially a giant centrifuge. It won't work for biological things, obviously. Whatever it is has to be able to withstand the force.
Biological things would be flat.
Not even flat, liquid. But anyway, it's fascinating to read these articles and to look at the pictures. I mean, it's basically a giant flywheel, and the release mechanism has to be incredibly precise.
Yeah, I prefer building an accelerator from Denver straight up Pikes Peak and just launch it from there.
That's a 14-footer, isn't it?
14,000 foot, yep. Yeah. And that's above a good chunk of the atmosphere.
It is.
It is. I've climbed a 14er before. I can tell you that it's above a good chunk of the atmosphere.
Anyone who's ever run across the parking lot at the top of a 14-footer and then has to sit down abruptly. I think you mean the spin launch, but it's, again, not so good for organics, and we're about how do we get humans up there.
Yes.
Yes.
It is good for getting material into orbit, but that's it. Not that there isn't a big economic case for that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be building it. But yeah, getting humans into orbit, different story.
And getting them beyond orbit, as Charlie Strauss says, canned monkeys don't ship well.
Yes, he doesn't. Now, I appreciated that you used a lot of the modern geopolitical bad guys and current issues. You made it very relatable for people. There's a little touch of the Illuminati and the trillionaires, or the 400 as you call them. Did you deliberately avoid the term and want to go in a different way, or?
I don't want there's a protests and trouble at Columbia University. I'm remembering 1968 when there were protests and trouble at Columbia when the students sat in the president's office and they went through his unlocked files. That wasn't a conspiracy. What it was one dirty hand washing another.
Yeah.
And the trillionaires, the 400, yes, I stole that from the 400 of New York City from a century and a half ago. But I'm guessing there's more or less about 400 of them at the time the book starts.
Yeah. I was wondering about the number because I was trying to think of counting the billionaires. I'm not sure I can get to 400 trillionaires.
This starts about in the mid 2070s. There's at least one person who's close to a trillionaire now. So I'm figuring 50 years.
It seemed like a logical progression to me, both in terms of the concentration of wealth and the increasing value of high wealth individuals. I thought it was fairly clever, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Reminded me of there was a TV series a while back, Altered Carbon. Do you remember that?
I know it was there. I don't think I saw it.
Well, it starred one of Jeannie's favorite actors. So they called themselves the Methuselahs. And their thing was they were elites, but they were elites because they lived a long time. Only the very, very, very rich could afford the...
Oh, I see, like Lazarus Long.
Kind of. Yeah. I liked your evolution of the mesh even through the period of the book, by the way.
Thank you. About 2 years ago, they put a small probe into somebody's bloodstream. This was in the newspapers to monitor part of their health.
Yep.
So I'm not making this up. This is how it's going to start. And more and more people will get it, and it will monitor your health. People are worried about genetic engineering. I had a conversation that ended at Costume Con a couple of years ago where this guy went on this absolute rant against genetic engineering and just went on for about 2 minutes and walked out. So I couldn't respond. So you're against genetic engineering. Where do you think it's going to start? How about if we do some genetic engineering so people don't develop diabetes? How about genetic engineering so that they don't develop MS?
Oh, let's just remember that life didn't give us lemons. We had to genetically engineer lemons.
Yes, but what I was thinking is where are we going to start? It's going to start with this, where you can monitor health.
Yep.
Think of how many people, I'm sorry, I know too many people that have died. Oh, we found you with stage 4 colon cancer. Oh, maybe if they'd found it with stage 1. So you're going to want to do this to monitor health. And the thing has some communication capability. First the mesh bots and then the meshocytes. There's a computer industry phrase about swarm, where you have a bunch of robots that work together. Mostly you need a doctor at the start anyway to check your health, but they can send out a message. And as a last resort, they can burn up all their energy and call 911 for you.
Yeah. When you think about it, we already have drones that can go into precise shapes as things. They have swarm robotics, the coordination of multiple robots as a system is out there now.
Yeah, it's going to be for monitoring health. You're not simply just going to drop dead one day for no fucking reason. Excuse my French. Like my late wife did. You can monitor and you will know that there's a problem when it first starts. And that's where the mesh starts. And then it develops that you get more capability.
There's an interesting that it made me go out and read. So you made me research something in terms of swarm robotics. Like right now, we're actually starting to look at it. There's behaviors out there. There's swarms of bees, these susurrus of starlings, birds, fish. It is the next step to industrial applications that they're working on. They're not there yet, but I liked that you made it clear that here could be a path. And that's what was super cool was the communication architecture that we have today doesn't necessarily match the requirements that your bots and then sites, I was trying to remember what they were and became.
Yeah.
The mesh bots?
Yes. They start out as mesh bots, but that's another point. It's not like the web. When you get more powerful ones, because they're in your bloodstream, they're going to go through your brain to where they can broadcast and receive direct from your visual cortex. Now we're talking about real enhanced reality, augmented reality. And no, you always know that it's that or whether it's the physical world in front of you. But there's another thing, what they start getting towards the end of Becoming Terran that shows up a little in 11,000 years are the mesh hosts, something that you carry with you, you wear or whatever, and it can communicate. And it's not an AI, it's an expert system, but it can be, especially because meshocytes are genetic, meaning once you've got them, your kids get them too because they're inherited.
Yeah.
That's why there's going to be religious people who go, you're not human anymore.
Kind of like mitochondrial DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. The point is that can advise you. Like you're 8 years old. If you say that, I know you're mad, but if you say that, you realize they're going to get really, really upset. This is taking off something from Brunner's The Stone That Never Came Down. The point is you don't get to ignore what's in front of your, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Well, there's no choice. You're going to believe what's actually in front of you.
Yeah. I liked that you brought up, there was a lovely moment that said, wait, they can now perceive more accurately. They're not believing all of our advertising and media. They're actually believing their senses again. And that was kind of a cool moment.
Yes, that's where you start seeing it. Brunner had, I think, a drug. This is more reasonable, I think. This is more achievable.
So I now have a question, though, because I hit the end.
Sure.
See where we are. We have some people, we're not saying which ones might be off in spaceships somewhere, and we might say whether or not we know where they are. I think I'm looking forward to, are you reading about how we get to the ones that stayed on Earth and played with it and met the aliens?
We don't meet aliens for about 400 years.
Fair.
I have a short story, which I'm still trying to sell, with a first contact story with them. But none of my aliens are going to look like humans in rubber suits. These first aliens that we actually contact, these are people who think of the oceans of Titan the way we think of Bali.
I presume that it might have an instinct, or surely you've read Terry Bisson's They're Made Out of Meat.
It's Red White?
Terry Bisson's They're Made Out of Meat.
A long time ago.
It basically was like, oh, it talks, you can't make me believe in thinking meat. It's all about carbon chauvinism, and it's two telepathic aliens that are like, well, what if we just pretend we didn't meet them and go find this other group instead?
Right. I'm just assuming that odds on us meeting aliens who really, really want to invade the Earth is like really minuscule.
Right.
Either they just walk it in and take it over, or they have no interest whatsoever. And these folks are like, ew, yuck, cold, rocky, hot, rocky, for them it's hot, rocky worlds, ugh.
I mean, if you look at it, think of us. We land on a world and they're in the middle of a war and just shooting anything and everything and stuff. It's like, we would back away slowly.
Come on, that's an old one about, why do you think aliens don't want to come here? Are you kidding? They shoot at anything that moves? What?
There's an old Golden Age story that I read a long time ago, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it was basically a short story in Asimov's or something like that about an alien race that came to Earth and was going to welcome us to the Cosmic Federation or whatever, until they found out that we had tested nukes on our own soil. They did what? And like Jeannie said, they backed away slowly.
Yeah.
So you have a couple string together of short stories in between these two then.
Yeah, these are off to the side because they're really not part of the main thrust of the novel.
Right. Well, that was why I was wondering is, are we going to...
If somebody will buy them, I'll be happy to sell them. The problem is I keep getting objections where they say, oh, this is so mid-last century science fiction, as though this is a negative thing.
I don't know that, because I think, like I said, you might try again just because of some of the interesting things that have come out. And I would throw, this is very topical for what's going on in the world right now. If they've got the one, there is a definite clear thing. Well, how do we get there? How do we make ourselves slightly more attractive to an alien wanting to be involved with us? And I think those middle two pieces might help you get the bridge between...
Oh, that's an interesting point, because should I give you a spoiler on the first contact?
Oh, yeah.
That when we finally start coming up with that we can exchange some information. These are our worlds. Oh, okay. Well, we're not interested in those. We like these. Oh, then why are you here?
Yeah.
And gee, that's going to be a part of the point of I'm on a panel at Heliosphere on second contact. What do you do? What do you have to say?
It creates that interesting case, and especially because by the time we get to 11,000 years, there's more than just one alien race.
That we know of about 3 or 4, and then there's the ones we run into. And if some of that reminds you of what we run into, reminds you of Clark or Olaf Stapledon, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it did a little bit. That was what made me think of there might be a middle book here. If Becoming Terran, it's a prequel, but at the same time, it could also reverse it and simply see this is.
Well, there's one that I've been through a beta reader once. In 11,000 years, there's that chapter where you jump back 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
One or two people have said, but wait a minute, I thought, no, you really jump back and there's things that they don't know that happened back then. So there's one I'm working on of what happened to those poor people who brought the revelation.
Right.
And it wasn't a lot of fun, let me assure you. That's the closest thing I've written to a sequel. As I said before, I'm not writing sequels. You can call it a series only in the sense that it's all in the same future universe. But that's it.
Yeah, but there's always completionists. I mean, like, there's people that sit down and chart out every single Star Wars movie and in what order they happen. And should you watch them in that order? I don't know.
I would say I watch episode 3 and forget 1 and 2. I'm sorry for some people. 3 was the one that I was waiting for after the original trilogy, because that's where you get the complete Greek tragedy where he should have killed him and he didn't.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to hang this out in case.
No, let's leave that.
Listening. No, I want to say the minute when they lowered the mask onto Vader's face and you got that first, that should have been the end. Just have it be the end right there, because that was tingling. And then they ruined it by showing me children getting adopted.
That's George Lucas for you.
It's like you had the perfect ending.
Yeah.
I don't think he listens to my podcast, though.
No.
Yeah, I don't think he listens to any. Well, never mind.
Yeah.
Moving right along. La la la. He's a billionaire. I'm not. Whatever.
Anyway, I've got a good number of minor characters, and the ones to really pay attention to are the major secondary characters, like Rose, like Rafe.
Yeah.
And yes, as a matter of fact, I'm real close with someone who is high up level accountant in a major county government. And yes, there were some thoughts of him when I was working on Rafe.
I could see it. So tell me about the style of this particular piece.
Okay. It started as a novelette about Francoise. And then there was a short story about Rose. And Eric Flint convinced me that unless you were really famous, there was no way you could sell a collection of short stories by one person. At which point I started looking and realized I could turn it into that all wove together. And I explicitly, deliberately chose the style that John Brunner used for Stand on Zanzibar, that of course was the one created by Dos Passos for his USA trilogy. It works really well, especially for the near future science fiction, because Dos Passos created it. Hardly anybody was reading, let's say, the New York Times. There was the radio that was down the corner. Maybe somebody at the store has a radio. You had to know what was happening in the world to understand the story. And it worked for Brunner to do the same thing. And it works just as well for this.
It absolutely does. When you first got it, I want to say we've gotten it. People have to read it. Tell us about how did you get involved with Novus Mundi to publish it?
Okay, I cheated.
Cheated. We like cheating.
Jeannie likes cheating.
My 11,000 Years was published by the late Eric Flint's Ring of Fire Press.
Right.
And after he died, about a month later, his widow shut it down. She's in a bankruptcy. I'm not going to say anything.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Let's see, that was July. He died in July of 22. Come late winter of 23, Walt Boyes, who was the editor for Ring of Fire Press, hooked up with a company called Untreed Reads. They had been around for about a dozen years or so at the time, but they'd never published science fiction or fantasy. Started to set up a new line for them of science fiction and fantasy. Their IP lawyer bought the whole thing, so it's top of the world publishing, but the line of science fiction and fantasy is Novus Mundi.
Nice.
And as soon as he signed up, my editor was going, Mark, how'd you like to be a first one?
That's exciting.
It was extremely exciting. The thing was, at the time, Bain had flirted with me, which is wound up being really annoying. A couple of weeks after she shut down Ring of Fire Press, I got contacted by Bain. Hi, Tony is thinking about rehoming at least some of the Ring of Fire Press authors. Would you be interested? Oh, no, not at all. of course, said yes. I was put in touch with Tony. I gave her the blurb about 11,000 years. She said, sounds interesting. And I sent her a copy of the manuscript and also the review that it got in Asimov's. 11,000 years got reviewed in Asimov's. And later this year, there'll be a review of Becoming Terran in Asimov's as well. And it was months. November came and I sent an email. Hi, do you have some kind of time frame for when you might make a decision? And I was told end of November.
Right.
End of November came, end of November went. Beginning of February and the end of March, and mid-March, I sent 3 polite emails, what's happening? And never heard from Bain. And Walt had been asking me, would you like to? So at that point, the readers probably know that I'm not that young. I needed to be back in print. So I said, let's do it. While I was negotiating the contract with what was then Untreed Reads, I said to Walt, by the way, Walt, would you like to see my next novel? About an hour later, I got an email back. Don't you dare offer it to anyone else. I'd spent the first, from January to July of 22 trying to find an agent for Becoming Terran. But at this point, it's like they're publishing me here.
Well, it's tricky. And this is something that we've chatted about with everybody because many of the traditional paths that our own Chaz Brenchley grew up with, it's not really like that anymore. Kit Carr, it's not like that. So we just have to keep moving and stay flexible.
Yeah, it's definitely not like it. There have been a few posts on blogs about this. It's just like there's a lot of agents who are leaving the industry. And with all the mergers, the 4 or 5 biggies, they want what they want. And they're really not willing to take a lot of chances on new people.
Yeah.
And so you just sort of run out of everything. You don't have the kind of Novus Mundi, of course, doesn't have the money that a major would have for advertising, but I'm real happy with them right now.
Oh, I got to say, I love naturally, I'm going to put their website and everything out on our, for this episode, but they have a good, solid website. And sometimes I always want to say, some of them do, some of them don't. So small press people out there, have a good website. Make it easy to navigate, easy to find around, easy to get what you're looking for. So
yeah.
Believe it or not, I am a snob about websites.
You also need, you can't just depend on, we're going to leverage all the books on our website. No. You have to get out there for other things. So that's why I was pushing fairly hard for getting reviews.
Yeah, and I would hope this is also a general plug just for anybody out there listening. If you've read a good book recently, go out and put something on Goodreads and Amazon are connected, but do one at Barnes and Noble, do things at multiple places, because as you're hearing right now from all of this, it's a difficult world. Even if you don't like something very much, put 2 stars on it because somebody spent 100 hours or more working on that project for you. And you at least deserve to give them 5 minutes of 1 star. I didn't like it, because why not? Meet them halfway.
The one thing I will ask is, if you're going to do a review, be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't like it because, and there was one reviewer, we've had words, who filed it under 11,000 years under science fiction and Mill SF. There is no way it is Mill SF. And I am not writing Mill SF. Absolutely, under no circumstances.
That's a little strange, actually, but...
Yeah, that's my reaction, because I make a point of the only military person on the ship in 11,000 years is the captain, and that's required by Confederation because the engine of a starship is an unbelievably powerful weapon.
Right, and for those that aren't familiar, by the way, he means military science fiction. It is difficult when you're talking about flying through space. Somewhere in there, somebody's going to have some kind of military vessel, unless it's so completely demilitarized science fiction. Yeah. Somewhere in there, somebody's an officer of something. I'm sorry, but it's not the thrust of your story.
No, I'm making a point of, the best advice is write what you want to read. Don't try and chase whatever the latest fad is, because by the time you get done, it'll be, the fad will have changed. What I grew up reading, what I discovered when I discovered science fiction, I want to read, not, let's have more wars. Oh, yeah, sure. Great. This is just the thing that we want to see for a future universe. Not.
No, Yours are far more complex with geopolitical events, and that's the fun thing about it, because I always say, how do I get from point A to point 11,000 years? And I really liked that about Becoming Terran, is you helped us get there.
And you saw in the last third people who had lived in this Terran Confederation for a good part of their lives. It's like it mattered. It meant something to them. It made their lives much better than they would have been before.
And I'm going to throw one final spoiler out for people here. This is, imagine what would happen if there was a universal basic income and a universal intrinsic health care. What could you do if you didn't have to worry about how you were going to pay your rent every month?
Yeah.
I'm betting there'd be a lot more writers and artists out there. And that's one of the things in this book that I think are the gems to be hidden away in there when you stop and think about them. And Mark, thank you for writing a real thinker's person book.
Let me just add one more thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a conversation that I started trying to get people to talk about in the 90s, and they're just finally beginning to start to talk about it now, which is what happens in what I called it was the post-Adamic world, when you no longer had to earn your living by the sweat of your brow. What happens when so much is automated that there aren't jobs for everybody?
Yeah.
Who's going to buy your houses as I was just looking today, who's going to buy this 3D printed neighborhood if there's no construction workers earning a living?
Yep.
And the only answer is to make effectively, we all have shares in the manufactories.
Yeah.
Then what do we do with our world? What do you do with your time? You're not going to spend your entire life playing games or sitting on a couch. Almost everyone has something that they're good at. How about a chance to do it?
Find out what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think the beautiful thing that comes out of it. There's some parts that are rough to read, but the beauty of what could be possible is one of the things I really liked about your book. And we will put links to the fascinating things we've discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. This is Mark Roth-Whitworth. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh and John Schmidt. Our intro and exit music are performed by Michael Engberg, who lives down under at manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Stream, Arm Street, and honestly, wherever you find your peace enough to do something creative. Maybe it's a beach. And hey, thanks for listening.